Good afternoon and welcome again. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today. My name is George Zavala, and I'm the Western Regional Manager at Welcoming America. Today's webinar, we will be discussing assisting undocumented entrepreneurs. During our time together today, we will start with some introductions and housekeeping items. We will share an overview of our partnering organizations. We will spend some time getting to know you all a little better using the Zoom chat. We will engage in a conversation about supporting undocumented entrepreneurs. We'll share some resources and ways you can stay connected, and then finally get some thoughts and some questions that you all might have once we've been able to have a longer discussion. So if we wouldn't mind, the next items that we're going to be discussing are our housekeeping items. So a few things to consider. If you all wouldn't mind remaining muted so that throughout the conversation, we can hear our panelists. One note is we will be recording this webinar and we will share with everyone who is registered after, just as a note so that you all can, have some peace of mind with that. One other note is please feel free to use the Q&A feature to ask any questions that you might have that are related to the topic of assisting undocumented entrepreneurs. You can also use the chat throughout the conversation or throughout today's webinar. Our team will do our best to capture any questions that you all might have. And then finally, we're going to be compiling all of these resources mentioned during today's call and follow up with some responses to and sharing some of those resources. So for today, some of our objectives or our goals is that by the end of our webinar, you'll have a better understanding of the benefits and challenges of entrepreneurship for the undocumented community, that you'll be able to learn about state investments in social entrepreneurship geared toward immigrants, regardless of immigration status, and that you'll be able to get access and information to resources, specifically those that are tailored to undocumented entrepreneurs. So next, I'll just take a brief moment to share a little bit more about Welcoming America. We're a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with staff all over the U.S. We operate a national network called the Welcoming Network. Next slide. It is composed of over 350 local counties, cities, and community-based organizations. Slide, please. The Welcoming Network was instrumental in developing the Welcoming Standard, which is a comprehensive roadmap for communities to become more welcoming places. The Welcoming Standard sets criteria or benchmarks that local governments, community organizations, residents, and others can use to hold welcoming places accountable and spur innovation. There are 7 framework areas of the Welcoming Standard that define truly welcoming places, and those are civic engagement, connected communities, economic development, education, equitable access, government and community leadership, and safe communities. And next, I'm going to pass it over to Chanel.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Chanel Scott-Contreras, and I'm the chair of the Build From Within Alliance. I'm also the executive director of Prosper Us Detroit, which is a member of the Build From Within Alliance. And our alliance is a national network of community development organizations supporting local entrepreneurship in neighborhoods across the country. We work in communities that have experienced systemic disinvestment resulting from centuries of racist practices and policies. We work to reverse this systemic disinvestment by expanding the community resources and opportunities to support low to moderate income entrepreneurs as the drivers of economic and social change in their own neighborhoods. We primarily serve low income BIPOC entrepreneurs, including many undocumented entrepreneurs and business owners. And we do that through a comprehensive model of support that includes 4 pillars, which include business training, technical assistance, small business and micro lending, as well as support with real estate. Our members, I mentioned, span across the country. So if you want to forward to the next slide. We have 16 organizations currently, members of the Build from Within Alliance, literally from Anchorage, Alaska to Miami, Florida, and many places in between. And though these communities are all very different, what we share is a passion and a mission and outcomes that support equitable economic opportunity through entrepreneurship, and that's inclusive of undocumented immigrants and immigrants more broadly. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Next, I will pass it to Ileana Perez.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm excited to engage in today's conversation along my esteemed colleagues. Thank you to Welcoming America, Build from Within Alliance, and thank you, George, and the team for coordinating everything leading up to today's event. And I do want to give a special thank you to Steve Tabachman from Global Detroit for suggesting and advocating for this webinar. A little bit about Immigrants Rising. We are a nonprofit organization that aims to empower undocumented people to achieve their educational and career goals through personal, institutional, and policy transformation. We offer a wide variety of programming and services in higher education, legal services, mental health, and entrepreneurship. Specifically related to entrepreneurship, over the past decade, we have developed resources and programming to support undocumented entrepreneurs thrive and live their best lives. We have a vast library of resources that you can access on immigrantsrising.org, as well as an entrepreneurship online learning platform available on spark.immigrantsrising.org. And with that, I will hand it over back to George.
Our moderator today is Ileana Perez. She is the newly appointed Executive Director of Immigrants Rising. Over the past decade, Ileana has pioneered efforts to empower and support undocumented entrepreneurs through resource development, training, and ecosystem building across the U.S. Her academic research has focused on immigrant entrepreneurs, the occupational and educational attainment of immigrant students, and economics of immigration. Ileana immigrated to the U.S. from Mexico with her family at the age of 8. She grew up in the California Central Valley and was undocumented for 27 years before adjusting her immigration status. Ileana holds a BA in mathematics from Fresno State, an MA in economics, and a PhD in education policy from Claremont Graduate University. Ileana, please take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, George. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to engage in this conversation. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to introduce my esteemed colleagues. First up, we have Armando Ibanez, who is a queer filmmaker from Acapulco, Guerrero, Mexico. Armando is the founder of Ibanez Productions, a production company that focuses on creating underrepresented stories. Armando is committed to portraying authentic Latinx characters and addressing real issues impacting immigrants and LGBTQ communities in the United States. Armando has been living in the United States for over 20 years and lives in Los Angeles, California. He graduated from Cerritos Community College with an AA in film and TV production. Welcome, Armando. So great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Great. Next up, we also have Jana Lazarevich, who is the Northern California District Manager for the State of California's Employment Training Panel and lead for the Social Entrepreneurs for Economic Development, also known as the SEED Grant. She has been working at ETP since 2016, supporting ETP's mission to partner with California businesses to create and retain high-wage jobs while providing workers the opportunity to train for career advancement. Jana holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Communication Studies with a focus in organizational communication from California State University, Sacramento. Welcome, Jana. Thank you so much for joining us.
There we go. Sorry, I was having a problem unmuting. Thank you, Ileana. Very happy to be here.
Great. And last but not least, we have Professor Dan Wang, who is the Lambert Family Associate Professor of Social Enterprise at Columbia Business School, where he also serves as faculty co-director of the Tamer Center for Social Enterprise, guiding initiatives related to inclusive entrepreneurship and community engagement. His research examines how social networks drive social and economic transformation through global migration, social activism, innovation, and entrepreneurship. His work has been published in top journals in management, sociology, and psychology, and has been recognized with awards and fellowships from the Academy of Management and the Kauffman Foundation. He currently serves as an associate editor for the Strategic Management Journal and special issue editor for Organization Science. He frequently contributes to the news media about topics at the intersection of technology, business, and society. Thank you so much, Professor Wang, for joining us.
Thanks, Ileana. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, we are excited to engage in this conversation. And before we got started, I wanted to provide a bit of a context for those of you that may not be familiar with the concept of entrepreneurship, specifically for the undocumented community. And so what we do know with respect to the undocumented status is that there is a huge barrier to employment as a result of individuals requiring a social security number and work authorization to engage in employment in the United States. This actually is written in federal law in the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, which made it illegal for individuals to work without work authorization in this country. However, opportunities do exist through entrepreneurship in that regardless of immigration status, individuals can engage in income generation through self-employment or through business ownership without requiring a work permit or a social security number. This is something that at Immigrants Rising, we've explored for some time. We actually have coined the term the undocu hustle, knowing that entrepreneurship is actually an inherent part of the immigrant experience, both formal and informal. I believe many of us in this space can probably think of somebody, a family, a neighbor, a friend, who has engaged in some type of entrepreneurial activity to make ends meet. We do know that there are undocumented individuals pursuing entrepreneurship, and some recent estimates suggest that there's about 800,000 undocumented entrepreneurs, although I suggest that this number is lower given the fact that it doesn't include the informal entrepreneurship that exists. It's estimated that undocumented entrepreneurs contribute upward of $15 billion in business income and actually boast higher rates of entrepreneurship than either legal permanent residents or citizens. There is a particular urgency with respect to DACA and those that have been left out of the program. We all know that DACA is under threat, and hundreds of thousands of undocumented DACA recipients may lose their work authorization and will need to think about alternatives to employment. It's also estimated that over 500,000 undocumented and DACA students are in post-secondary education and need to be thinking about the post-college opportunities to be able to utilize their skills and generate income. Further, there's about 600,000 undocumented students in the K-12 system that at this time are not eligible to receive or apply for DACA, for the DACA work permit. Again, there is a need to be able to consider entrepreneurship. And so I'm excited to engage in this conversation with my esteemed colleagues. Armando has been a community member of Immigrants Rising for many years. We have seen him grow and thrive as an entrepreneur, and I'm very excited to have him here. We've had a close relationship with Jana as being seed grantees of this amazing initiative that I'm so excited for you all to hear about. And most recently, we've had the opportunity to partner with the Columbia Business School to be able to analyze some of our qualitative and quantitative data. So let's dive into the conversation. And we're going to start off with Armando. Armando, can you share a little bit about your journey toward entrepreneurship? Tell us, how did you get started and what kind of business do you have?
Hi. It's my journey. Well, I have a production company. I produce videos. We edit also videos. We do the post-production and the whole levels of production, videos and films. Mostly my work is provided to nonprofit organizations here in LA because 10 years ago, I was on the street as an activist protesting for immigrant rights, advocating for immigrant rights. And that's where I got to connect with a lot of people in activism and community organizing. And that's how I learned that first I could go to college in California through AB 540, which is a bill that allows undocumented students to go to college.
No, it looks like we may have lost Armando. Okay, while we do some tech support here to bring Armando back, I think we're going to move on to Jana. Jana, again, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited for you to share a little bit about this amazing state initiative called the SEED program. Tell us a little bit about it. How did it come about?
Definitely. Thank you so much, Ileana. I'll just give a little bit of background in regards to the state of California and how we came up with this initiative. The California Dream, some of you may have heard of, is the idea that every person can achieve a better life, regardless of where they start out. So California has been on the leading edge of change, enacting bold reforms that reflect our California values. And it's according to the governor's office that the state of California is also the 5th largest economy in the world and is on track to become the 4th, overtaking Germany. It's because of an entrepreneurial and innovative spirit that has allowed California's diversity to flourish and the economy to grow and become one of the largest in the world. California also has the highest concentration of immigrant business owners in the nation. With the governor himself, Governor Newsom, being an entrepreneur as well, he strongly supports pathways to entrepreneurship. So when the SEED program got started, it was actually the governor's office was heavily involved in and directly developed the SEED program, or what we call the SEED initiative, which stands for Social Entrepreneurs for Economic Development. This supports entrepreneurship for Californians facing significant employment barriers regardless of immigration status or background. The initiative assists individuals with limited English proficiency, regardless of immigration or citizen status, as well as non-citizens, including undocumented immigrants, refugees, and asylees. So this initiative offers all California immigrants a viable means to earn an income and support themselves and their families, which will create equity and wealth building. Entrepreneurship also brings new business creations, new jobs, a tax base, and more money circulating within the immigrant community in California as a whole. So as we developed the SEED program and procurement process, we began with the program design end in mind. So the procurement was designed to work with experts, and in this case, community-based organizations throughout California, including Immigrants Rising. We have partnered closely with these community-based organizations because they, I would say, are our boots on the ground. They are the organizations that are the face of the SEED program. And providing the support to the immigrant trainees. So the CBOs do provide the training, disbursement of microgrants, and technical assistance services. Some topics that training is received in is finance and accounting, accessing capital, reports, marketing, legal writing, electronic payment options, choosing a business name, and business planning as well. With the microgrants that are given to the trainees that finish the program, we looked at this as an opportunity for entrepreneurs to get that upfront money that they need for a startup. So benchmarks were developed to get the money out, but also as it being state funds, also be good stewards of public funds as well. Coming through a state program, the employment training panel was able to run the program with 10% administrative fees, as the intent of the SEED program was to provide as much funding as possible to the underserved communities who had zero services in California. With ETP, it was not about the administrative money. It was about our department doing something impactful for the communities. And again, we were only successful in this initiative because of the hard work of the CBOs, such as Immigrants Rising, whose mission is to create thriving immigrant communities throughout California.
Great. Thank you so much, Jana. And then also to add to the SEED initiative, so it's we've had 2 rounds of funding. The first year of funding was a total of a $10 million budget allocation, with 75% going toward the entrepreneurs themselves in the form of microgrants. Year 2, it was a $20 million allocation over the course of 2 years. So thousands of individuals across the state have been able to benefit from direct access to capital capital in the form of grants. And Jenna, can you talk a little bit about how is the program seen throughout the state of California?
So it's been a very positive impact. We do collect as many success stories as we can from the CBOs in regards to the entrepreneurs, and those are shared within the Labor and Workforce Development Agency, which is our employment training panel's parent department, I guess you could say, and also with the governor's office. We have some strong advocacy through the governor's office and our labor agency, and so we like to continue to promote the program, and it is very well received. The governor actually made a visit to a seed awardee who actually graduated from the Immigrants Rising program. I want to say it was last June down in Los Angeles. So we do try to get as much spotlight as we can on the program. And again, the governor really, really enjoyed his visit. And we try to also, as an executive team here at ETP, visit with micro grantees whenever we're out traveling throughout California as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Jana. And as was mentioned, Immigrants Rising is one of the seed grantees, but there are several other nonprofit organizations that received some of that funding as well. And I believe we're still having some technical difficulties with Armando. So Dan, we'll hand it over to you. Can you talk a little bit about what sparked your interest in researching undocumented entrepreneurs, and why is this research topic even important to consider?
Thanks, Ileana, for the opportunity to be here. And thanks, Jana, for sharing your thoughts about the wonderful SEED program, which is what I've been studying for the past several months. And I'm excited to share with all of you some of the findings that we have. But Ileana asked a question that to me is fairly personal, because although there is a professional and intellectual motivation for me to have spent the past 10, 15 years of my life studying immigration and entrepreneurship, there's also a personal motivation. And the personal motivation is that I'm a 1.5 generation immigrant. And for those of you who don't know what that means, sociologists tend to call 1.5 generation immigrants as those who came to a host country when they were young. So I came to the United States from China when I was very young. And my parents at that point were on a student visa in the United States. They, having come from China, as first generation immigrants. Somewhere during my childhood, their status got adjusted to be asylum seekers. And that was because of their involvement in activism in China. And so although this is all retrospective, such that I didn't know any of this as a child, but only later as an adult figured all of this out, their immigration status was tenuous, and they had to understand and how to navigate the system to know what their career pathways and prospects would be if it would be the case that they would never be allowed to return to China or happen to occupy a liminal status in terms of immigration in the United States. And so it's something that personally I have indirect experience with, and it's something that for me intellectually has been incredibly inspirational for something that I've been looking at as the object of my research, which is in many ways about innovation and social transformation. Even though I teach in a business school where I teach topics such as business strategy and technology, my kind of intellectual and educational background is in sociology. It's what I got my PhD in. And I often like to think of innovation as the product of a number of different sources of innovation. And the way that I study innovation is seeing it as a product of migration primarily. Because if you think about innovation as the synthesis of new ideas and new methods, then when people move from place to place, that becomes the mechanisms, the train that ultimately transports ideas from one context to another context that can lead to novel solution or the discovery of novel problems. And so this interest kind of led me to studying at first high-skilled immigration. These are people who typically come to the United States, for example, which is what I was studying at the time, under employment visas with some educational credential. And the most curious aspect of studying this group of individuals was that I noticed that there was a lot of invisible opportunity, but also a lot of invisible barrier as well. You wouldn't expect people to come to the US on employment visas to ultimately want to enter into entrepreneurship because the terms of their immigration status is tied to their employer. But it turns out that if you dig into the data, it's not just among undocumented immigrants or immigrants of other status, but among immigrants with high-skilled employment visas, the rate of entrepreneurship is also higher than the national average among non-immigrants as well. And so what this said to me is that there was this disconnect in terms of policy in the United States as far as immigration goes in giving opportunity for those who want to create value through entrepreneurship as a method of economic inclusion and development and growth as well. And so that launched several different projects that I've looked at over the years about folks who come to the US, work, and then transition to entrepreneurship. Some go back to their home countries and bring ideas, but also face challenges. And then some give back to their host countries as well. And all of this is relevant to undocumented immigrants because although there are invisible barriers that might not be known to everyone, even on this conference, there are also plenty of opportunities that come from organizational innovations that Ileana and Jana know well about that allow undocumented individuals to express their kind of creative energy and capacity through entrepreneurship. And also it's a means to economic inclusion. And that's currently the focus of my research.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. And Armando, perfect timing for you to join us. I'm glad we got the technical issues resolved. And it's a perfect opportunity to segue into a little bit about your story that you were starting to tell, Armando. You talked a little bit about getting the opportunity to learn about access to higher education and also about entrepreneurship as an alternative to employment. So you can continue with that story.
Yes, sorry about the technical issues. Yes, so I feel like I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship. I didn't know anything. I was barely in college, and also as many undocumented immigrants in college, I was like, what am I gonna do once I graduate? Like I'm studying film, video production, editing, and I don't know, I'm not gonna be able to get a job once I graduate. So I was struggling with that. So I decided to just write stories about undocumented experiences and start a YouTube series about, it's a scripted series. And without me knowing, that series was my network, because then people start reaching out and saying, hey, I love your series, but do you think you can record a video for us? Or do you think you can edit a video for us? And without me knowing, that series opened doors because people started hiring me to do work, to provide services as a production company. And at the same time, I started learning about the first organization that I learned about providing services to undocumented immigrants was Immigrants Rising, because I didn't know anything about once people were reaching out, I was like, how am I going to charge? How am I supposed to charge? People would say, send me an invoice. I didn't know what an invoice was. And Immigrants Rising was the organization that I could learn all of this about independent contracting, about starting your business, about starting your LLC. And they were providing also grants. Before the seed grant, they were also providing a different grant that I applied to. I didn't get the grant the first time, but I was able to learn about Immigrants Rising and the resources that we're providing. Along with that organization, I've been learning about other organizations that have been teaching and providing resources and information to undocumented immigrants. I didn't know that you can start a business. You can legally start a business and provide services. And there's so many professions that you can do. So for me, it was honestly an eye-opening to know that there is actually some opportunities, better opportunities for undocumented immigrants. Unfortunately, because we're all in survival mode, we don't have access, we don't have time to invest. So I feel like very privileged and blessed that I had access to all of this. And nowadays long story short, I've been probably the last 5, 6, 7 years, I've been doing production videos for different companies and organizations, and partnering with different companies. And I've been doing what I love, which is filmmaking.
Thank you so much, Armando. And for any of you interested in seeing Armando's work, his series is available on YouTube. Many of our videos at Immigrants Rising that profile immigrant entrepreneurs have been filmed by Armando. So definitely encourage you to check that out. And I will say that access to information and knowledge is extremely important. We have found that many immigrants, regardless of status, have been engaging in informal entrepreneurial opportunities and may not realize that they can actually access capital. They can open bank accounts. They can incorporate as businesses. And that's really the gap that we're trying to fill in making sure that individuals know that these opportunities exist. And so with that, Jana, let's go back to you. And why don't you share a little bit about some of the key findings from the year one evaluation of the SEED program?
Oh, yes, definitely. Thank you. Some of our key findings, again, as Eliana was talking about, we had a SEED 1 program and then also SEED 2 program, exactly the same program, 2 different funding streams, and for the most part, different CBOs participating in each program. We are currently trying to advocate for a round of SEED 3 so we can continue this great program through the state of California. But I do have some good data and some good information that we have on our first round of SEED or SEED 1. Just some few highlights on that. That SEED entrepreneurial training was administered throughout California. So the training occurred all the way from Northern California down to Southern California. So it really covered a massive geographical area. Training and technical assistance services were also facilitated in 39 languages. So CBOs would bring in interpreters where needed, just depending on the language. So that was very impressive to hear that 39 languages were used for this program. And it's because of the interpretation services that were brought in that 90% of micro grantees that were surveyed stated that the language barrier did not affect their ability to be successful in the SEED program. So they still felt supported the entire way through the program. 923 immigrants in California received a collective total of approximately $6.3 million in microgrants. That is also used to support a starting of a business or maintain a small business or a worker cooperative. Business startups, and again, this is from 5 out of 9 CBOs that were reporting. Business startups were 536 new businesses throughout the state of California. And including those 536 entrepreneurs, it generated 620 jobs. And again, this is just out of 5 out of 9 CBOs that were reporting. So that number is much higher. Total number of immigrants that received entrepreneurial training, there was 2,142 immigrants who received a total of 426 hours of training. Again, this was administered by 9 CBOs, all with 189 years of collective experience. So those are just some of the highlights of SEED 1. And we do anticipate SEED 2 to have larger numbers as well in regards to the generation of new jobs and business startups.
Great. Amazing, Jana. And then again, for those of you that may have just joined us, we're talking about that SEED program. It is a California specific program, but we are going to talk a little bit about some recommendations and some ideas as to how to expand programming like this across other states. And Dan, coming back to you, I know that you've also had an opportunity to take a look at some of the data, both qualitative in the form of interviews of some of our SEED entrepreneurs and some quantitative data as well. Can you share a little bit about what have you found so far?
Sure. A lot of what I have to say, or what I'll highlight, complements what Jana just told everyone. The kind of data that we're looking at, in addition to understanding the basic demographics and backgrounds of folks who have received seed grants, but it's also kind of based on the outcomes of their grants. And so this has to do, for example, with the economic outcomes, how they feel that the seed grant has helped them. And also in our interview work, we've are compiling a set of narratives to better understand the challenges, but also the opportunities that some of the undocumented entrepreneurs that have received the seed grant have experienced as well. I think the top line most important finding from looking at all this data synthesized together kind of defied the expectations that I had going in, which was that we were expecting that if we were to compare, say, undocumented entrepreneurs to immigrant entrepreneurs of other status, for example, those who are DACA recipients, or those who have green cards, or those who are kind of have immigration status that is confirmed but pending, undocumented immigrants don't exhibit any gaps in terms of knowledge about how to run a business and knowledge about the domain of the startup or venture that they're operating in. And so there's no knowledge gaps in terms of those kind of functional elements of running a business and creating value out of nothing, which is what entrepreneurs do. But the bigger gaps that emerge come from gaps in terms of knowledge about access. And when I say access, I mean access to financial institutions, access to legal services, about running a business, access to just information in general about what they can and can't do from an institutional regulatory standpoint as well. And it's ultimately that lack of access that has prevented many entrepreneurs from starting their business earlier. And to me, the policy implication of that is that that's an eminently addressable problem. There's lots of value that's waiting to be created by folks who see this as a pathway to economic progress and mobility. But these access barriers are what's preventing that from happening. So that's one top line finding that's really stood out to me from the quantitative data. A couple of other things that emerge from the survey and quantitative data is that compared to other immigrant groups, undocumented immigrants in kind of proposing a budget tend to ask for less than they need. And also undocumented immigrants tend to rely far more on friends and family for funding than other kinds of financing institutions. And on the one hand, this is really interesting because it suggests that creates more freedom for them because there aren't loan terms, for example, that are necessarily enforceable by law if you're just getting funding from family and friends. But on the other hand, it also creates a greater impetus to do something because there's a personal obligation to your friends and family to do something valuable with the funding that you've just received. And that's kind of the hypothesis that we're working with, which explains what I think is the final finding that we have, which is that, as it turns out, undocumented entrepreneur-founded enterprises also tend to perform better in terms of a sheer return on investment standpoint. And so if you look at the revenue to cost ratio, revenue to investment ratio, that tends to be on average higher for ventures founded by undocumented entrepreneurs, of course, all else equal. And so there's something here about how policy and programs such as Seed that support undocumented entrepreneurs through no strings attached grants, they can make a real difference in terms of having positive economic spillover effects, in this case for the state of California, but in other regions as well. I could go for hours on the interview data because some of the narratives are so interesting. But let me just mention to me personally what was so interesting about reading through the 52 hour to 2 hour long interviews that we've done with undocumented entrepreneurs. And what was really interesting is the diversity of services and industries that were represented by our interview sample. It's such a pleasure to hear Armando talk about his kind of film editing and filmmaking business because that fits right in within the range of services, offered by undocumented entrepreneur businesses. They range from wineries to accounting services to tutoring platforms to food entrepreneurs to farm co-ops. The diversity is really kind of representative of entrepreneurship in general. And so what I think is fascinating about that is that it shows that there's a lot of similarity between the kinds of businesses that undocumented immigrants aspire to found or those that they have already found, and just entrepreneurship in general. So there's every reason that they deserve in many ways support and greater support from all kinds of organizations.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. And Armando, I saw you shaking your head when Dan and Jana were talking about some of those key points. Can you elaborate a little bit about how you have perceived access to support, training, access to capital to grow your business?
Well, you know what I was thinking when I was listening right now? That it starts since the beginning is that many of us undocumented immigrants, first of all, we feel ashamed to pursue bigger goals. First. Second, we're not even allowed to dream big or to know that we can achieve more. So I feel that I'm so glad that there's actually more access and information. Unfortunately, not everyone has access to information. But one thing that I love about this is that many of us have the capacity to do more with our businesses. Unfortunately, not many of us have the access. So for me, it's always been what we need more is information available to undocumented immigrants, because like even my journey from college, there were already resources that I didn't know about. And sometimes I was told that because those resources were not requested by students, especially undocumented students, like those resources were taken away. So people don't know about these resources. This is why it's important. I think that the main goal for organizations, for companies that want to support undocumented immigrants is to make the information, the resources, the most available that we can. And to make sure that we promote the resources in a way that undocumented immigrants feel comfortable applying, feel comfortable and welcome applying to all of these resources. So for me, it's all about information, to make information accessible to undocumented immigrants. For starting, one thing that I really liked about the SEED program and Immigrants Rising was that they made the program available in different languages. We all know that immigrants, many of us don't have access to English language. Many don't speak English, don't have that privilege. So I love that the SEED program was very inclusive in that, very inclusive in helping people that were not able to speak English. So for me, it's always making undocumented immigrants comfortable and let them know that they're safe applying. And even if they have a question, it's gonna be responded and it's gonna be helped. I think that for me, that's the main curse of providing information to undocumented immigrants, providing resources, always making them feel safe and making them feel that any question can be answered.
Great. Thank you so much, Armando. So helpful. And I know that the time is flying by, and we would like to save some time for a Q&A. So we're going to start wrapping up some comments here. Jana, I know that we have a national audience that is probably thinking, how do I get a program like SEED in my state? What recommendations do you have for other states looking to replicate programs like SEED?
Definitely, like I had said at the beginning, it was really the support from our governor's office that really pushed this program through. So my recommendation would definitely be to advocate, to keep advocating and get your local and state officials involved to try to push for a similar program. That's really how this all came about. And to Armando's point, we've seen so much more demand for this program, especially from Seed 1 to Seed 2, because of word of mouth. So it would be somebody took the training, received the micro grant, started their own business, and friends and family are seeing what is happening and how there is no strings attached, I guess you could say, to the micro grant. And it's just helping them gain access and capital to start their business. And so it was really a lot of word of mouth throughout the communities that really made this program successful. But in launching it through other states, it's definitely just having your government officials backing you for funding. And even if it is a small amount of funding just to get the program started and off the ground, you'll easily be able to show how successful it can be. And hopefully something that we can continue to have every year and keep it going.
Great. Thank you, Jana. And I will reiterate the importance of coalition building. This is definitely something that just Immigrants Rising should be doing. It's something that every other organization should be thinking about in terms of incorporating entrepreneurship as part of their offerings and services. And so, Dan, can you talk a little bit about the importance of collaborating with colleges and universities, which may be an unusual partner for many CBOs to be thinking about?
Absolutely. I think colleges and universities are probably the best kept secret toward channeling resources and progress in terms of programs like this for economic mobility. I loved everything that Jana had to say about, for example, how you might advocate collectively for a similar program in a state that's not California. What I was thinking about during her comments is, what does the bridge to something like that look like? And that bridge could involve universities. I can talk about any similar kind of programs that in my role as the director of the Social Enterprise Center at Columbia Business School that we run that center entrepreneurship as a means to address economic marginalization. We run these types of programs directly out of the university. You can even think of them as kind of like a mini seed program for marginalized groups who aspire to found companies as a means to economic mobility. And one constraint, of course, is that not every university might have the resources or capacity to do that. I feel lucky because Columbia and Columbia Business School especially happens to be the beneficiary of lots of kind of resources, financial in nature, usually that enable us to be able to create initiatives that resemble the SEED initiative. An example of a program that we've been running for a long time, the past several years, involves a group of individuals or addresses the needs among a group of individuals who also face stigma and also barriers to employment. These are formerly incarcerated individuals. So we have programs that train them in coding, technical skills, and entrepreneurship. And there are microgrants available for them as well. That type of model is very much generalizable, and looking at kind of the needs of undocumented immigrants and other immigrant groups that face marginalization. That's another task that we're looking at. But I have no doubt that universities around the country have similar energy and motivation to do the same as well. And so the way that I encourage you to think about universities is that they're kind of an experimental platform because many universities have resources, they have students, they have faculty, they have staff who are all driven by the mission to better the world through knowledge and education, and entrepreneurship is something that can be the subject of that education as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. And thank you to those of you that have been adding your organizations, the kind of support you offer. Thank you so much. Global Detroit has amazing resources, the Women's Economic Ventures. There are so many different amazing organizations out there that it is important to uplift each other, to be able to identify more support for one another. And before I pass it over to some audience Q&A, Armando, what would you tell what advice do you have for individuals in the audience who may be thinking about entrepreneurship now that they heard that this is an opportunity?
What other tips you said?
Yes, what tips do you have to share to entrepreneurs?
I mean, the first one to entrepreneurs, I would say like not to be afraid. I mean, not to be afraid to dream bigger, and it's not gonna be easy for sure. Sometimes we wish there was a book that tells us exactly how to do things, but not to be afraid to figure out. One thing that usually the undocumented community asks me a lot is like, it's like, do you find the answers? But what I think that I learned the most about my journey is that sometimes you're going to ask everyone how to do things and no one's going to have the answer for you, and you're going to have to figure out the answer and finding out the answer yourself. And that was like the biggest and hardest lesson that I learned, but there's no other way. So for me, it's like to partner, to always look for organizations, because those are the ones who have been helping in my journey as an entrepreneur, and to not follow only my goals, but my dreams too. So for me, it's always get involved with community, get involved with organizations. I think that's one thing that we can do to start a better understanding of our journey as entrepreneurs.
Great. Thank you so much, Armando. And let's see, George, do we have some questions in the queue? I know that I've tried to keep a lookout on the chat, but there's been a lot going on.
Just any additional or top of mind resources that you can think of for day-to-day undocumented entrepreneurs as they're either beginning, as they're in the process, just what comes to mind?
Yeah, and I can answer, and definitely feel free to step in, other folks. But so at Immigrants Rising, this is what we've been doing for the past decade, is developing resources to inform specifically the undocumented community about ways to incorporate as a business, access capital, apply for an ITIN. So we do have a vast library of resources available at immigrantsrising.org. By the way, we will be compiling a list of resources as well as a recording of this webinar and sending it out so that you don't have to frantically cut and paste links from the chat. So we will include some of those resources. We also have an online learning platform that includes the most important baseline entrepreneurship topics for undocumented individuals to learn about the basics. I will say that we do have baseline information, and we typically refer individuals out to other organizations to get more information about legal considerations. We encourage them to visit their local SBDCs. We encourage them to identify their local banks, their local networks, because really beyond sort of the initial awareness of entrepreneurship as an alternative to employment, it really requires an ecosystem of support for individuals to be able to thrive and get access to all the information and resources that go beyond what we as one organization can offer. So that is really also an invitation for those of you here with an organization. Let's figure out how to connect the dots, how to get individuals to the right place to get the answers that they need.
Great. I think that takes us into our next portion, but I would love to give you all an opportunity to share any final thoughts, or more than anything, just to thank you all as well for joining us today, our panel.
Great.
Okay. Yeah, of course. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for this amazing, insightful conversation. The next portion, if we wouldn't mind getting the slides back up, is bringing us to our closing, where we will be able to share a link with you all to be able to access more Welcoming America resources. As a starting point, please feel free to check out the following link. As a note, a reminder of one of our housekeeping items: we will be following up with all of these resources, or as many as we can compile from this conversation, as well as contact information, the recorded slides, and then we'll be doing our best to make sure that the resources are available in different languages. So yeah, feel free to use that website as a starting point. And again, look out for the email coming from us with all of those materials.
Great. Thank you so much, George. And again, thank you so much to our panelists, Armando, Jana, Professor Wang, and an invitation to continue this conversation. Obviously, we only had an hour. There's only so much we could cover in an hour, but there is a lot more that we can continue to discuss. Definitely feel free to reach out to me as well for any other questions related to entrepreneurship. Thank you again.